Kyle Busch is in a contract year with Rich Schultz Racing in 2025, and NASCAR is considering rotating the championship race starting in 2026. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Hemrick's 2025 Napa scheme that we'll see throughout the majority of the 2025 season. I gotta say, this scheme looks really, really good. I like the dark number, I like the yellow, I like the blue contrast. This looks really awesome, looks really, really great. Looking forward to see it out on the racetrack this upcoming season. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is William Byron's 2025 Liberty University scheme that we'll see in 6 races in 2025. This is down from 12 races in 2024. Not much to say about this. The only thing that's kind of interesting is the fact that Liberty's dropping how many races they're going to sponsor William Byron. I don't know if that's changing going forward, but I think the scheme looks okay. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Osmar's 2025 Ziegler scheme that we'll see around 6 or 7 races in 2025, including the Daytona 500. Scheme very similar to last year's Spire. I think did a really good job on it. I do like the colors of it overall. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack throughout 2025. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chris Buescher's 2025 fifth third paint scheme that we'll see throughout the 2025 season. No changes from 2024, and I'm okay with that. The scheme looked really good last year. The schemes looked really good the last couple years. You really don't have to change anything on it. I think it does look really exciting and pretty good, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Busch Beer. As it was announced on Monday morning, the Busch Beer has officially announced some limited Busch Beer cans for the Daytona 500. They're going to have some NASCAR logos on those beer cans, I'm pretty sure. I think Daytona 500 is also going to be on those cans as well. This is a really cool opportunity, obviously, with Busch Beer being one of the biggest brands in the NASCAR series at the moment. Obviously, with them working with Ross Chastain in 2025. This is a really, really good thing to see, and with them being a major brand in the sport, I think this is really cool that they are doing this. And I got to say, the cans that they're bringing out do look awesome, and they do look really amazing and really, really good. So I'm very excited about that for sure, nonetheless, and I think it's pretty cool that they're doing this. It's a really great partnership, and congratulations to the opportunity to continue working with the Busch Beer brand once again in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, this is supported by the BW channel on Twitter, but it looks like Bubba Wallace may have a new sponsor for 2025, and it looks like it may be Safelite. Now, Safelite has been associated with Toyota for many, many years. They sponsor drivers, I believe, like Kyle Busch from time to time, Noah Gragson when he was over there at KVM, and they've also sponsored Corey Haim the Craftsman Truck Series over the course of the last 2 to 3 years, and really since 2021 as well. So it's really cool to see this. We don't know what sponsor is going to get replaced for 2025. Obviously, we don't know if the Air Force is coming back fully yet for 2025. We do believe McDonald's is going to be back for next year, and some other companies that have been associated with Bubba's are probably still going to be sticking around for the 2025 season. Obviously, with the lawsuit going on, it's unclear what sponsors want to leave at this point. That's one thing that could come into play is the fact that there might be less sponsorship for Bubba next year because of the lawsuit going on. But it's good to see at least one Toyota sponsor is going to be loyal for 2025, and pretty cool to see that Safelite will be working with Bubba Wallace in 2025. Really awesome and really exciting stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Raja Karuf. As it was announced yesterday that Raja Karuf has signed with the management company known as WME Sports. WME Sports is one of the biggest agency companies out there for sponsorships and branding, among other things. And I believe he is the first NASCAR driver to sign with WME Sports. If not, you can correct me on that. But I think this is really, really huge for Raja. It's going to be able to help him grow and really outreach his brand. And I think it could grow his popularity in the sport inside and outside of the sport as well. I think this is a really awesome partnership for him. I think they're doing a really great job to bring new sponsors, and hopefully with this move, because Raja, of course, is going to be sponsored by HendrickCars.com throughout 2025, but I think this is a really great partnership for Raja, and pretty exciting, great to see that Raja has officially signed with WME Sports for 2025. Really exciting stuff. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar. As it was reported by Marshall Pruitt from Racer.com that Fox has begun filming driver-themed IndyCar commercials for 2025. Remember, IndyCar, of course, will be joining Fox starting in the 2025 season, and every single Fox IndyCar race will be on Fox, including even the qualifying sessions for the Indy 500 as well, which is a really, really big deal. Now, NASCAR has done this in the past. This is nothing new. They've had Fox-themed NASCAR commercials in the past, but it seems like that they may be starting to take things a little more seriously with IndyCar, which I think is kind of very similar how they started off their relationship with NASCAR many years ago. And I think you could tell that Fox at least wants to give at least a little bit more of a crap about the Fox coverage for IndyCar than they do for NASCAR. I think we all know as NASCAR fans, when it was announced that Fox was going to be picking up the coverage for IndyCar, many people were very, very concerned because of how bad Fox's coverage with NASCAR has gone over the course of the last year or so. But hearing this news, this tells you they're taking things a lot more seriously. And while it is frustrating in a sense that they are doing it the way they're doing it here, at the same time, if they're taking things seriously and they can put on a really good product, I think that's all we ask for, right, is that them actually do a really good job. And if they can do a good job, I think that's a positive for everybody here because they could really help grow IndyCar in a big way. And I really hope that Fox can take this seriously and do the best job they can. Otherwise, fans are going to hate on them and turn on them really, really quickly if the coverage isn't good. But I think having IndyCar-themed commercials for Fox, I think is really, really good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Honda and Nissan. Now, this is a really major story in the motorsports world going on at the moment. As it was reported by Adam Stern and a couple other outlets yesterday, that Honda and Nissan will be entering negotiations toward a merger, joining their resources to compete against Tesla and other Chinese companies as well. From what I understand, Nissan is struggling immensely. I made a video about a week or so ago talking about manufacturers that could join NASCAR, and I thought at the time that Nissan was doing a lot better. But it seems like Nissan is not doing really, really good at the moment. Meanwhile, Honda is really growing immensely right now. And you look at Tesla and you look at some of the Chinese companies, they're making a lot of money on the electric stuff as well. Now, why does this tie into NASCAR? Well, obviously, there have been rumors about Honda potentially joining NASCAR over the course of the last couple of years, really the last decade or so. There have been rumors about Honda wanting to come into the sport. And it seemed like talks and conversations were really picking up early in the year. However, those talks have died down because they haven't added a hybrid system yet, and it sounds like that they may be sticking around with IndyCar. There still is a chance they could leave IndyCar at the end of their contract, which is 2026. And let's be real and honest, the NASCAR the new car, if they wanted to be approved, had to be approved by September for 2026. So those we're getting a new manufacturer regardless is 2027. To me, I certainly think it's really, really interesting. A sim like this is going down. I think having Nissan and Honda team up together, I think is certainly interesting and kind of a big story, in my opinion, that I think is going to be talked about for a while going forward. So we'll see what happens and more information does come out when it comes to Honda and Nissan, but I think it's something we'll be following as the talks of them potentially joining NASCAR and an EV car coming into sport. We'll see what happens going forward and down the road. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports. Now, if you were on Twitter yesterday, you probably saw that Hendrick Motorsports thanked a lot of the sponsors that sponsored Chase Elliott throughout the year. I saw Lumar, I saw Coca-Cola, and I think that chicken sponsorship as well. But one sponsor you probably noticed is Hooters. Now, basically, Hooters has been sponsoring Hendrick Motorsports since around 2016, and they, of course, sponsored, I believe, Greg Biffle a couple years ago prior to that, but then they started sponsoring Chase Elliott in the mid-2010s, and they actually were on Chase Elliott's car in 2024, of course, when he went to victory lane with them at Texas Motor Speedway when he won his 19th career NASCAR Cup Series event at that racetrack, and now he's only one away from picking up 20. What's really interesting is a couple of months later, we found out that there's a potential lawsuit going on between NASCAR and Hendrick Motorsports and Hooters because of missing payments they have not received. It's also no secret that Hooters is struggling a lot in their business right now. Businesses that are not doing really good with the economy currently at the moment right now, which is why Hooters has basically been backing away from a lot of their sponsorships and a lot of their branding as well. And I think it is very interesting to see this, right? They're thanking Hooters for their sponsorship over the years. We do not not expect Hooters to be coming back for 2025 to sponsor Hendrick Motorsports. There's probably some new sponsors that are coming in to sponsor Hendrick next year is what I think. Maybe King's Hawaiian. We know they're expected to leave RFK in 2025. But I do think that it's cool that at least they are thanking Hooters for what they've done and where they've been to try to help. But at the same token and same time, when you see something like this and you see Hooters, which sponsored Chase Elliott, and them no longer sponsor them going into the next year, you kind of question what is going on here. So it's very interesting for sure to see something like this. It's interesting that Hooters is getting thanked despite the fact there's a lawsuit going on between both of them currently at the moment. I think it's a very interesting thing that is going on between both Hendrick and basically Hooters, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Trion Garage. As it was announced on Monday morning that Trion Garage has announced their 2025 crew chief lineup for the upcoming season. So Jake Hampton is going to crew chief the number 1 truck. This truck will be the all-star truck for drivers potentially like Bubba Wallace, maybe down the road other guys like Kyle Busch, everyone's come back. Maybe of course we'll see some drivers like Christopher Bell, maybe William Swallow was supposed to make some truck series starts in that truck. There's some other drivers that could be in that truck throughout the year, like let's say Christopher Bell, maybe Ty Gibbs. Who knows at this point? Derek Smith is going to crew chief the number 5 truck for Tony Breidinger. Scott Zipadelli is going to crew chief the number 11 for Corey Heim. Jeff Hensley will crew chief for Tanner Gray instead of Taylor Gray this year, who moves from the 17 to the number 15. And then Jeremy Donnelly, who crew chief for the number 15 truck, that being, of course, Tanner Gray last year, will be the crew chief for Gio Ruggiero in the number 17 truck in 2025. And Matt Pusha, once again, will be the competition director for the team in 2025. Not many major significant changes. Scott Zipadelli working with Corey Heim, great decision in my opinion. Those two have gelled really well together over the course of the last couple of years. That makes a lot of sense. I think Derek Smith crew chief last year for Dean Thompson, so no changes over there. The other significant change is the fact of a swap for the 15 and 17 trucks. I think they're trying to put Jeff Hensley with Tanner to make him a lot better. I just really hope that Tanner can really start getting it together because let's be real and honest, Tanner Gray has really not set the world on fire and stepped up to the plate like people in his team have. And I just don't know if even with Jeff Hensley getting over there, maybe he makes the playoffs at this point, but I don't see Jeff Hensley leading him to a lot of success down the road. I think this is going to be the first time that Hensley has not been able to lead a driver to winning races, which is kind of a big shame, or contending for wins at that point. So it's a very interesting lineup nonetheless for 2025. I think it is a solid lineup on the crew chiefs for 2025, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Van Alst. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Greg Van Alst will be joining Joey Gase Motorsports in 2025 in a majority of the races throughout the season, starting at Daytona, driving a number 35 car. Obviously, Joey Gase Motorsports made a pretty major announcement for 2025, and many people like myself are theorizing that he was going to be one of the drivers behind the wheel of the Joey Gase Motorsports team for 2025, and we were correct on that. Now, Greg Van Alst did have an okay year in ARCA this year, but there was a lot of struggle throughout the year. It seems like ever since he did go and pick up that win at Daytona last year, it seems like his luck has been completely awful. Pretty much in every single NASCAR start he's had the last year or so, something has gone wrong. He's had a crash he's been involved in. He's gotten engine issues. He's had other things go wrong for him, and things have just been out of his control that have unfortunately not been his fault. I'm really hoping with him going to Joey Gase Motorsports, I'm really hoping he has a chance and opportunity to really, really prove himself throughout this upcoming year. Now, what are realistic expectations? Let's be real. We probably shouldn't be expecting Gray to be a contender to win races or even championships in this car. Joey Gase Motorsports has never been a team that can go out there and compete for wins. I think the goal should be top 25 in points. I think that should be the goal by the end of the year. And top 30 in the owner's points should be the goal for the year as well. That's what it should be. I think Greg does have the capabilities to do that. The question is, will the equipment be able to hold up? If it can, I think Greg can have a solid year with the team. The other big question we have to ask is who's going to drive the other car next year? I'd have to think it's Mason Maggio, right? With Scott Austin being the co-owner of the organization, and of course Mason Maggio having a really good friendship with Scott Austin, I'd have to think that he's going to get the other seat for 2025. Nonetheless, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to how he performs. I'm looking forward to see what Greg Van Alst can do. I think he does have a lot of talent, and I think he does have a lot of capabilities. We'll see what he can do in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season with this team and program. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Hos Factory Team. As Aaron Kramer, who will be the crew chief for Cole Custer in 2025, was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio yesterday talking to Alan Cavanna. And there were some very interesting comments that I kind of wanted to talk about from this. According to what he said, the 41 car is basically a pseudo fourth RFK racing car. And it feels like that nothing has really changed since getting over there for the year after, of course, Tour Haas Racing closed, even though they still might end up finding their way involved in the 2311 and from our Motorsports lawsuit. Now, obviously, saying a pseudo fourth RFK car is certainly very interesting because we know that RFK Racing is going to be helping in a pretty big way with the Hos Factory Team. Obviously, this team, there's a lot of questions around it, right, going into 2025. This is basically Stuart Haas Racing, just rebranded. They're downsizing from a four-car team to a one-car team this upcoming year. And there's certainly some interesting things that I can see about it. They've, got Cole Custer moving back up to the Cup Series this upcoming year, which I got to say, Cole Custer, I think is going to be very, very competitive. I genuinely think that he has a chance to be competitive at certain events because I think Cole Custer is a better driver now than he was 3 years ago back in 2022, and then, of course, when he got the Cup in 2020. I think he's a much more mature driver, and he's shown a lot more capabilities. Look at what he's done in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But I still do have questions around this team. Now, if they are a fourth RFK car, I think they're going to be fast at super speedways, and I think they could be fast at short tracks as well. What is the goal for this team this upcoming year? Well, I think because of how competitive the field is going to be, I am predicting they're going to have a chance to finish top 25 in the points. I think it's about where they're going to finish. Now, I understand people are going to say, well, they're saying they're a fourth pseudo car, so therefore they should be competing to get in right. Here's the problem. You have so many drivers that are really, really competitive and so many competitive teams right now in the series that I just don't see Hos Factory Team breaking into the playoffs unless they win a race at a super speedway. But I think top 25 should be the goal because you're going to have Spire, who's going to be a lot stronger next year with Michael McDowell, Carson Osabar, and then, of course, you do have Justin Haley there full-time now. You've got the 2311 trio, Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, and, of course, Riley Herbst, who I think is going to outperform Cole Custer, unfortunately. You've, of course, like I said, got the RFK trio of Ryan Preece, Chris Buescher, and Brad Keselowski. You've also got the Trackhouse trio of Ross Chastain, Shane Van Gisbergen, and, of course, Daniel Suarez is in a contract year. You've got other teams as well out there like Hendrick Motorsports, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, William Byron, RCR of Kyle Busch, and Austin Dillon. I think Hos Factory Team will have some big shoes to fill throughout the year, but I really hope this team can have a lot of success. We'll see what this organization and team can do for sure in the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Big Machine Racing. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Big Machine Racing will officially be teaming up with Forte Racing to run at the Rolex 24. The number is going to be the number 78, and it will be Lamborghini Hurricanes that they will be working with in 2025. Two of the drivers have been announced for this car. Parker Kligerman, who drove for Big Machine Racing full-time last year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, also in 2023. Misha Goikhborg, who has made a lot of starts in IMSA, I believe has won some major events in IMSA as well, will be the other driver behind the wheel of that car. Now, there are going to be two other drivers behind the wheel of this car for 2025 Rolex 24. They just have not announced who those are going to be. This is now the second NASCAR entry that has also, of course, been announced for the Rolex 24. Remember, it was announced last Thursday that Trackhouse Racing will be fielding a car in the Rolex 24 as well. They'll be teaming up with TF4 Sport with number 91 car. It'll be Shane Van Gisbergen, Conor Zilic, Scott McLaughlin, and Ben Keating behind the wheel. I am really excited about this. We know that Big Machine Racing, they're making some massive moves. There is a chance they could field the second Xfinity Series car for the 2025 year. But at the end of the day, I think having a team like Big Machine Racing get the chance and opportunity to go and do something really, really different and go and do something, run in the Rolex 24, to me, is very, very huge. Obviously, they do have stuff in the Trans Am series as well. And we know the Scott Borchetta is made of a lot of money, which is one of the reasons why this also is happening for 2025. And I think it is really cool to see that you've got Big Machine Racing doing this right going into this upcoming season. I think that this team will have a very good chance to win. Now, obviously, I think they're competing in GTD Pro, and they're going to be, of course, going up against Trackhouse Racing, the 14 AMG Lexus car. The Vassar Sullivan cars are going to be really, really strong. We know they're going to be fast. I'd have to think Ray Hall, if they're still in them, are also going to be competitive as well. And I think there are also going to be some GT cars as well for Meyer Shank and a couple other teams as well. Nonetheless, this is really, really exciting stuff and pretty awesome and great to see that Big Machine Racing will be fielding a car in the Rolex 24. Really exciting and awesome stuff, and glad to see this will be happening for the 2025 season at the Rolex 24. Really exciting and awesome stuff. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christian Rose. As it was announced on Monday morning that Christian Rose will be joining Nissan Motorsports full-time in 2025, driving a number 44 truck. He will join Matt Mills, who will drive the number 42 truck in 2025, and he'll also join next year, basically Caden Honeycutt, who will drive the 45 truck full-time in 2025. To be honest, I did not see this coming. We knew that Christian Rose had been talking about running full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series. I thought it was going to be an AM Racing truck, or thought it was going to be with Raymond Brothers Racing. I did not think he'd be going to Nissan Motorsports for 2025. Now, it's unknown and unclear if he is replacing Bailey Curry at the time for 2025, or if this is just an extra truck and they're going to run 4 or 5 trucks throughout 2025. We'll get back to that in just a minute. If Christian Rose is replacing Bailey Curry, I think this is a really terrible decision. Look, I get that Christian Rose does have a little bit of money behind him, and that's one of the reasons why he's getting this chance and opportunity. But at the same time, Christian Rose is just not that good. I looked up his ARCA stats, right? He had a couple top 10s last year. He had, I think, an occasional top 5 throughout the year. I don't think Tony Breininger had any of this past year. But Christian Rose, I just don't really understand why he's getting this opportunity with Nissan Motorsports. Again, he's around 30 years old. He's a little bit older. So I guess you have someone who's a veteran of racing, right, and a little bit older drivers probably got a little bit more maturity. But at the same time, I just don't see Christian Rose coming into this year and really being a championship contender. And that's the thing about the Truck Series. We're going to get to that here in a little bit with another story that we're going to talk about. But Christian Rose, I just really am not expecting much this upcoming year. I do not have him making the playoffs this year. I just don't really think he's going to make it. I don't think he's going to have the pace and speed to contend on a week-by-week basis. I think realistically, he's going to finish around 15 to 20th most weeks. He might even finish outside the top 20 most weeks, even though the Truck Series is going to be less competitive this upcoming season than it has been in recent years. But I do think that Christian Rose is going to have to see what he can do. And I just do not feel like that Christian Rose is going to be competitive enough to be a champion, like a championship contender, or be as good as his teammate Caden Honeycutt this upcoming season. Hopefully he can prove me wrong and have a really strong year, because if a guy like him can't have a really good year, that's all that matters at this point. But at the end of the day, like I said, I just really don't have high expectations going into 2025. And realistically, I think it's going to be a very much an up and down season. We'll see how he ends up doing, because I don't really think he's going to be a major threat. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for him in that car in 2025, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jack Wood. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Jack Wood will officially join McAnally Hilgeman Racing full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2025, driving a number 91 truck. He will join 3 other teammates in the season who we'll talk about here in just a minute. Jack Wood last year in 2024 made select starts with McAnally Hilgeman Racing, ran a majority races in the number 91 truck. And I looked up his numbers from last year. I don't think he even scored a single top 10 finish in 2024. But he did run full-time in ARCA West. And you would have thought that he would have been a championship contender, right? I believe Jack Wood finished 5th in the points, behind the likes of people like Isabel Robusto, I believe, Trevor Huddleston, and Sean Hingarani, who went on to win the championship. And Jack Wood is someone who has not really done very, very good in truck competition. He's had a few good runs over the years. He had a couple occasional good runs with GMS Racing the last few years. But he's just someone that I don't really have high expectations on because he didn't really do anything in ARCA. He hasn't done anything in the Craftsman Truck Series. The only big reason why Jack Wood is in this truck this upcoming season is because of sponsorship and money. I thought they would be fielding a fourth truck that was going to be an all-star truck for drivers at this program. There were drivers rumored to be going to this truck, like Zane Smith had the front row stuff falling through, but obviously, of course, that's not the case for the year. He will have some decent teammates this upcoming season. He will, obviously, of course, have Daniel Hemrick joining the 19 truck. He will, of course, have Connor Mosack piloting with the 81. And then, of course, Tyler Ankrum driving the 18 truck. But I look at the truck series as a whole. And you've got good talents in the series this upcoming year. Like your Corey Himes. Like your Roger Cruz. Like Caden Honeycutt. Like Layton Riggs. Like Tyler Ankrum. Like Daniel Hemrick. I'll throw Connor Mosack in that first group as well. Ty Majeski. Matt Kraft and Ben Rhodes, you name it, all those guys. But then you have this other group of drivers this upcoming year that I just don't really see much in. Tony Breininger is one of them. Jack Wood's another one. Christian Rose is another one that I just don't really have high expectations on. And there's other guys probably going to get announced here sooner rather than later that I'm just not high on going into this upcoming season. I don't expect much from Jack Wood. I don't think he makes the playoffs. I think he's going to get maybe occasional top 10 throughout the year. But I think realistically he's going to be the weakest link of this team going into 2025. I think the three other teammates are better, and I think that he's not the best talent out there. Now, the big question we all have is, are they going to run a fifth truck? It doesn't sound like they're going to run a fifth truck this year. When they put out the t-shirts for the merchandise for this upcoming year, they basically had all four trucks signed for the year, and I didn't think they'd be running a fourth full-time truck for Jack Wood of all people. Again, I just don't see this working out really, really well for Jack Wood this upcoming season. I think he's going to unfortunately struggle quite a bit throughout the year, and I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire in 2025. Hopefully get prove me wrong and have a really strong year this upcoming season. But at the end of the day, like I said, I'm just not expecting much. And I do think there'll be some pretty big struggles coming the way of Jack Wood going into the 2025 NASCAR season. We'll see how he ends up doing. But like I said, I'm not expecting much from him going into 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tim Brown. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Tim Brown will make his NASCAR Cup Series debut at the 2025 Busch Light Clash at the Los Angeles Coliseum, driving a number 15 car for Rick Ware Racing. Tim Brown, for those who do not know, I did a video on this channel yesterday, but Tim Brown, for those who do not know, is the winningest driver at Bowman Gray. He has 101 wins over the years and has 12 track championships at the track. He is one of the icons. I think it was a documentary that came out not too long ago around Bowman Gray, the Madhouse, and Tim Brown was featured immensely. And what's really interesting about this as well is Tim Brown is 53 years old, but he actually works at Rick Ware Racing as a specialist, I think, on their tires and some chassis stuff as well. So Tim Brown is coming from in-house of the program for 2025. And I gotta say, this is an amazing opportunity for Tim Brown to get this chance and opportunity. We've seen a lot of road course specialists over the years. We've seen people like Will Brown and Shane Van Gisbergen and Kimi Räikkönen and Jenson Button come through the ranks and all that stuff from the road courses, and Connor Zilch a little bit too. You've had some dirt specialists over the years like Bobby Pierce get some opportunities in NASCAR. Other people like Scott Bloomquist have gotten a chance and opportunity. But you don't see a lot of these days where you see like these short track specialists come in and race. Guys like Dick Trickle back in the day, like a Butch Miller back in the day were in the sport from the short track scene. You don't see that as much nowadays. And it's really cool to see that someone like Tim Brown, who had a ton of success racing at this racetrack, is getting the chance and opportunity to come over and race at Bowman Gray. I think this is really, really exciting stuff. And I am very excited to see what Tim Brown can do in the 2025 Clash. I think he's going to be very, very competitive for sure. I don't think he's going to go out there and win the race, but I do think he'll be competitive enough to be very fast enough to make the race, especially the main event. I would expect him to be a major contender to definitely go ahead and make the main in 2025. As for the second car from Rick Ware Racing, they will have a second number 51 entry throughout the year, which of course will be the Charger entry next year. We are thinking it's going to either be Corey LaJoie or Cody Ware. I'm leaning toward Corey LaJoie getting the seat for next year. Cody Ware, as much as I think Cody Ware has improved a little bit as a race car driver, I'm leaning toward Corey LaJoie getting that seat for 2025. We're still waiting on that ride. Same with Front Row Motorsports. We're kind of waiting on what that team's going to do for 2025 at this point. But I do think announcements coming on that very, very soon, probably for the end of the year, even though we're still waiting on that. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens, but I'm very excited about this for this team and organization, and I'm looking forward to see what Tim Brown can do. I think he's going to be very competitive, and I certainly expect him to be a major factor and a serious contender in this event. Congratulations, opportunity, Tim. You've earned it, my man. Good to see you getting the chance and opportunity to race in the event with Rick We're Racing in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt Benedetto. As it was confirmed on Monday that Matt Benedetto will be returning to Viking Motorsports in 2025 and has signed a 2-year contract extension with Viking Motorsports for the 2025 calendar year. Now, big story on Viking Motorsports that we discussed on the channel a couple days ago. They will be making a lot of changes for 2025, except the driver, of course. They'll be switching a number from the number 38 car, and they'll move to the number 99 car for 2025. They're also moving to a new shop, I believe, in North Carolina, and they are going to be having an RCR alliance, an ECR alliance for 2025. Don Sackett apparently talked about all this on Facebook. Apparently, they were talking to Toyota about getting an engine for a lot of money. Obviously, of course, Toyota did not have any Joe Gibbs Racing engines available. They were looking to go to Toyota. Then Ford, they said, what can we do with Ford? And they were offering, I think, $1.4 million for Ford contract. And Ford was not planning to really give them anything if they stuck around with Ford. So now they're switching to Chevrolet for 2025. Having an RCR alliance is a really good decision, especially on super speedways. We know that the RCR cars are very good at qualifying as super speedways, and Matt Benedetto, in my opinion, is a really, really underrated super speedway racer. So I could see him being really strong on the super speedways next year. But as for everything else, this team came in 2025. We were not really expecting much from this program. And last year, this team had some really strong runs. Last year, Matt Benedetto had 3 top 10 finishes, one of them being on a super speedway, but the other 2 being at non-super speedway tracks. This team showed a lot of potential throughout 2025, and I think one of the biggest reasons comes from the driver, Matt Benedetto. Matt Benedetto is one of the most underrated drivers in NASCAR, in my opinion. Yes, Matt Benedetto has burned a lot of bridges over the years, and he has made a lot of mistakes. There is no denying that. But at the same time, if he's been keeping his head down the last few months, hasn't really been doing anything stupid, he's just been doing his own thing, and he's been not putting his foot in his mouth, and he's been doing what he needs to do as a driver. And he's building a program up, and that is the most important thing. Now, what are realistic expectations for this team and Matt Benedetto in 2025? Realistically, I think the goal should be top 20 in the points. That's what the goal should be for this upcoming season. I do not believe they are going to make the playoffs. There's a lot of good competition this upcoming year. You've got guys like Sheldon Creed and Sam Mayer, Hos Factory Team. You've got the junior motorsports cars of Connor Zillage, Sam Mayer, Carson Quaffle, and defending champion Justin Allgaier. You've, of course, got Austin Hill and Jesse Love, Nick Sanchez, Christian Eckes, Harrison Burton, you name it. There's a lot of really strong competition going into 2025. But I think this year could be a really surprising year. They could also get a super speedway win. If Matt Benedetto doesn't make a mistake at a super speedway, I could see him having a really good chance to win one of those. And he's also a very underrated road course racer as well. No one really talks about how good of a road course racer he really, really is. So I could certainly see him being really strong and really competitive at the road course tracks in 2025. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this team truly ends up doing this upcoming season. The Xfinity Series field is really stacked this upcoming year with a lot of really great rookies and a lot of great drivers returning and veterans returning to this series as well. I can't wait to see what he can do for 2025. I'm excited for this upcoming season for Matt. Glad to see he'll get the chance and opportunity to join up with Viking Motorsports for the 2025 season. We'll see how he can do in 2025, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we've got more updates on the 2311 and Farmer Motorsports lawsuit. It seems like every day or every other day, we're getting updates and new information around the lawsuit. According to Bob Pockers, the 2311 and Farmer Motorsports have filed briefs opposing motion to dismiss cause NASCAR controls tracks and next-gen suppliers. Continuing on in their brief, they say they reiterate their previous arguments about basically potentially losing things and losing money, and basically they continue on talking about the Stewart-Haas Racing charters as well. Both 2311 Racing and Farmer Motorsports have been looking to purchase the Stewart-Haas Racing charters. And if this does not get denied from the judge, and the new judge, Kenneth Bell, who's come in very recently, does not deny the motion for all that stuff, they're looking to go to discovery and go to everyone involved in this case. Here's what's going on, and here's an update on everything. 2011 and Farmer Motorsports are looking to get a preliminary injunction once again. NASCAR is trying to deny that, and they basically want this lawsuit dropped completely as a whole. So they feel like this lawsuit to them is not really good. Recently, in the last week or so, there were some very interesting updates last week, I believe on Wednesday or Thursday. I did not get to cover it on the channel until, I believe, Monday, but there was some very interesting stuff around that, where 2011 and Front Row basically presented some very interesting evidence. Jerry Freese said that he had a conversation with Steve Phelps around the Stewart-Haas Racing charter purchase, and believed before September 12th they had the conversation, and Steve Phelps apparently had told Jerry Freese that they were going to approve the transfer of the charter from the organization from Stewart-Haas Racing. But everything changed, of course, when Farmer Motorsports and, of course, 2311 went into lawsuit. And Joe Custer also was told multiple times by Steve Phelps that this was going to happen, and they don't have the infrastructure to go ahead and run 2 more cars because they've done a lot of downsizing and they don't have the personnel going into 2025, which is certainly very interesting, right? So obviously this antitrust lawsuit has been going on for a very long time. We've got new judges coming in, and we've got new information that continues to come out on a day-by-day and a week-by-week basis. We still do not have a date currently at the moment. That's one thing we all are waiting on at this point, is for the court case to happen and when the court date is going to take place. Today is December 18th. And keep in mind, the 2025 season technically starts in 46 days from today. So less than 7 weeks is basically the Clash, and then you have 60 days until the Daytona 500. They need to know if they're going to be able to be charter teams in 2025 or not. Now, obviously, when it comes to the charter situation, 2011 was going to run a 4th car in the Daytona 500 for Martin Truex Jr., and they're so likely going to run a 4th car at some point throughout the year for Corey Heim, maybe Carlos Busch as well. But obviously, that is not happening. But then you've got Front Row. They're trying to get a 3rd charter team set up for next year for Zane Smith, and Zane Smith is expected to go to that program for 2025. The problem is you've got this lawsuit going on currently at the moment that's making everything really complicated and really frustrating for everybody involved, because they want to announce Zane Smith. That's one big thing, is they do want to announce Zane Smith. The problem is they're going to have to drop the lawsuit for that to happen, or they could just run as open teams, but do the sponsors want that? I don't know if they're going to want that, to be honest. So it's certainly going to be very interesting as we get more information on this lawsuit. And we're probably going to continue to get more updates on this as time progresses and goes on. And I think more information will be coming to light very soon on the lawsuit. Again, we wait for more stuff to come out. It's going to be interesting to see how Michael Jordan and his team over there look at it. Again, it's very interesting stuff. And I think more information will be coming out on the lawsuit here very soon and in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about the championship race. As it was reported by Adam Stern last night, the NASCAR is debating internally about whether to start rotating the championship race to different markets in the coming years. And the venues being considered will go beyond Phoenix and Homestead. Continuing on with the article, they do mention that Phoenix and Homestead are potential possibilities, but there were a couple interesting tracks that I see that were mentioned. One of those being Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Now, the championship race, there's been a conversation about the hosting of the championship race over the last couple years, and some people on social media have said it should be very similar to what the NFL does. Every year for the Super Bowl, which I don't like to compare stick and ball sports to NASCAR, but their final game, the Super Bowl, is played at different venues. I think they're going to be playing, I believe, in New Orleans in 2025, and I think they're going to San Francisco in 2026, and they'll go back to Atlanta in 2027 or 2028. They go to different venues for that event. I think it's no secret also that people have been very frustrated with the racing product at Phoenix Raceway. There is no denying that Phoenix has a fantastic facility. I am not going to deny that. From people who've been to the racetrack, they say the facility is absolutely incredible. And I do think the facility does matter. But to me, the most important thing that should matter about a championship race is the racing product. And Phoenix Raceway does not have a good racing product right now. And every single year since we've gone to Phoenix for the championship race, the ratings have dropped immensely. I don't think only 2.3 or 2.4 million people or something like that, I'm not exactly sure, tuned into the championship race. It was less than last year's. So people are tired of the racing at Phoenix, and they're also tired of Penske dominating. So where you go for the championship race if you're looking to rotate it and change it up every year? Well, there are tracks that I think are options. One of those is obviously Homestead Miami Speedway. And Homestead would make the most sense for 2026. The Homestead Cup race and Homestead Weekend have gotten moved earlier in the year in 2026 in spring, not because of a warm weather date like they're trying to say it is. The big reason why they're moving it earlier in the year is because they want to host a Homestead Championship race once again. If the council approves, because they're trying to get everything done down there, there's a very good chance that we could see Homestead host a championship race in 2026. They need renovations. That's one thing I will say about Phoenix compared to Homestead. Phoenix has got renovations up to date, while basically Homestead doesn't have any renovations. They're out to date, and they need to make changes over there. Because the racing product is amazing. They do pretty decent promotion for the championship race when they had it. So they really need to get this speedway up to date. And then you've got everything pretty much check marked down there because the weather's really great down there. Homestead, especially of how good the Straight Talk Wireless 400 was earlier this year, how amazing the racing product was, it'd be the best championship race as a whole that you could really, really get. Some other tracks I could see hosting it, Las Vegas Motor Speedway. The weather's usually good at that time. The racing's generally really good at the racetrack. I thought the race a couple months ago, South Point 400, was really, really entertaining. You do have the issue with SMI, but I guess NASCAR and SMI can work toward that. NASCAR, of course, has owned that date for many, many years, so maybe you could see that happen, but I think Vegas basically hosting would be very interesting. And one track that should be considered is Kansas. Kansas, one of my home tracks. Number one, puts on amazing racing. The weather, while it can be really cold at times, isn't that bad. I kind of live close to that area, so the weather usually isn't terrible at Kansas Speedway around that time, though it can be like what it was in 2020 and can be super, super cold. Then, of course, you have the facility being pretty much up to date. You've got everything around the track looking good, and promotion is great. And Kansas is racing is top tier with the next-gen car. It needs to be a track that's going to put on really, really good racing and great promotion as well. Because anyone can be good at this track if you get the right setup and the right equipment as well. And the other big thing it does need to change is the championship format. I'm really glad to see that NASCAR is looking to change up the race itself. We got to change the championship format. Now, NASCAR, of course, is in talks and conversations for changes for 2025. It doesn't sound like there's going to be any major changes for 2025. But another big thing that isn't talked about is the fact that I personally I don't care how good the racing is, I don't think that a track should be able to host 2 dates, right? Because here's why I don't think it should be able to host 2 days for a championship. No one should be able to have a competitive advantage going into that race. That's one of the reasons why with Phoenix, that if Phoenix continues to host a championship, they should only have 1 day. The track that's hosting a championship race should only have 1 day so that no one has such a big advantage. When we go to Phoenix in the spring, Penske always has an advantage when they come back because they have a notebook from the prior time. If he downsides that track to 1 day per year, it basically doesn't put as much into that, and that notebook becomes less. So I really hope when it comes to the championship race and what they're going to do on that as well, they do need to make sure that it is not going to be just basically 2 races in the same year. I think you can only have 1 race at that track and a facility. Will they do that? I don't know for sure, but I think going forward with the championship race, that's how it should be. I love the fact they're looking to make changes to the championship format, though, do a rotation of certain races. If the Auto Club short track can get done down the road. Maybe that track could host it. I don't know if it's going to be able to. Nashville's one that I would consider as well, even though I think the racing can sometimes be mediocre at the track. It didn't think it was that good in 2024, even before all the chaos and stuff that happened at the end. But I think it's interesting that they are finally making changes, hopefully we can see a change to how the championship is decided going forward in 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, this story that's kind of went under the radar over the course of the last week or so, but the Couch Racer account put out a tweet talking about how many wins do you think RCR is going to have in 2025. And then a couple hours later, and I retweeted this as well, they put out a tweet saying that Kyle Busch is in a contract year with Rich Schultz Racing in 2025. Now, obviously, we knew that Kyle Busch had been a contract year in 2024 with Rich Schultz Racing, but they did have an option year for Kyle in 2025. Kyle Busch had signed a 3-year deal with Rich Schultz Racing with the 2 main years for 2023 and 2024, with 2025 being an option year, which they have exercised that option for 2025. Earlier in the year, there have been some talks and conversations, of course, about Kyle Busch leaving RCR at the end of 2024. Among the teams that have been mentioned were Spire Motorsports, 2311 Racing, Joe Gibbs Racing, and Hendrick Motorsports are all mentioned as possibilities where Kyle Busch could have ended up for 2025 had RCR not exercised their option for him to stick around, which they obviously, of course, ended up doing for 2025. Kyle Busch could be getting back to very similar territory he was in 2022, where he could become the biggest free agent. He is going into this upcoming season as the biggest number 1 free agent going into the year. And obviously, could Kyle Busch stick around with Rich Schultz Racing? That is certainly a possibility, right? Kyle Busch could stick around. But I think the only big way Kyle Busch will stick around with RCR for 2026 is one thing: if the team gets a lot more competitive. If the team runs like they did in 2024 and the end of 2023, because 2024 was an awful year for the team for the most part, except during the summer, I don't know if Kyle Busch will stick around. If the team runs like they did in early 2023, they're competing for wins, they're competing for victories, they're very, very competitive, then Kyle Busch, I think, will stick around with the team. But I think there's a really good chance he also could leave the team at the end of the year. And that's why he's the number 1 free agent right now for 2026. Now, let's say Kyle Busch does decide to leave RCR at the end of the year. What options are going to be available? The first one we'll talk about is Spire Motorsports. Now, Spire Motorsports is a team that Kyle Busch does have affiliation with his Truck Series program. They bought his truck program for the 2025 year, for the 2024 season. KBM got sold off. So that could be an option for Kyle Busch to go down to the Craftsman Truck Series program and run for the Truck Championship. Maybe retire from full-time Cup racing and go down and run in the Truck Series. Do I think he wants to do that at this point? No, I still think he wants to be competitive in NASCAR Cup competition. Could a Spire car be available in Cup? Certainly, maybe a 4th car next year, because I believe Justin Haley, Carson Ospar, and Michael McDowell are all signed for 2025. But I don't think that's going to be fully an option at this time. But I will throw Spire as a possibility if McDowell does retire at the end of the year. Next one is Joe Gibbs Racing. I would say this actually is a really likely option of him going back to JGR. Denny Hamlin is going to be in a contract year with Joe Gibbs Racing. And I have a really interesting theory that Denny Hamlin may retire at the end of the year. If Denny Hamlin does retire at the end of the year and at the end of this season, I think you're going to end up seeing him potentially join the program in 2025, go back to Joe Gibbs Racing, where I think Joe Gibbs will be willing to get him. I don't think there's any young drivers in the Toyota pipeline right now that are available that you can put in. Corey Heim is never going to go to Joe Gibbs Racing. Chandler Smith is not going to be, I believe, in a Toyota pipeline next year. So they're going to have to get someone that isn't a veteran. And I think that Kyle Busch would fit that veteran role very, very well. So I throw that one out as a possibility. Some are going to mention Hendrick Motorsports. Hendrick could be an option if Bowman struggles, but I think Bowman deserves to be in that 48 car and technically has a contract through 2026. So I do not see him losing that ride at that team in 2025 at this point. And then, of course, you have some other teams like Trackhouse. It all depends on how Connor Zilisch does at Junior Motorsports. Because I don't think Daniel Suarez is going back to the team next year. I just don't see Suarez forming well enough to stick around with Trackhouse. And most likely, Connor Zilisch is going to get that C. Granted, if they wanted to bring Kyle Busch in for a year or two and wait for Connor to move up a couple years, that could be a possibility. But Connor, in my opinion, is way too good to keep him down there next year. So I don't think that is going to fully happen at this point. And then, of course, you have some other teams like RFK Racing. Again, maybe takes over with the 60 car, but Kroger likes Ryan Preece quite a bit, so I don't think you're going to see him replace him there. I think it's going to be very interesting, and 2311 is another option too. Problem is, Riley Herbst, I think, has a multi-year contract. Bubba Wallace has a contract through 26, and Tyler Reddick has a contract. So now we talk about where he could go next year. Obviously, RCR, he could still stick around next year in 26, and that is definitely an option. But I'm leaning toward Joe Gibbs Racing right now. Again, Denny Hamlin is also in a contract year this upcoming season. Denny Hamlin is going to be the oldest full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver this upcoming year as well. And obviously, with all the distractions of the lawsuit and everything, I think Denny Hamlin is going to shockingly announce retirement. He's going to take the 11 with him over at Joe Gibbs Racing, and I think that Kyle Busch is going to bring the 18 car back. I think Kyle Busch ends up at this moment, I think Kyle Busch goes back to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2026. That's my early prediction right now, and I think that Austin will take over a seat in 2026 as well. Very interesting. I think my prediction, of course, could end up being wrong, and that doesn't end up happening. But at this moment, I'm leaning toward Kyle Busch going back over to Joe Gibbs Racing for the upcoming season. That's my early prediction right now. Again, Kyle Busch also getting a lot older at this point. There's a very good chance Kyle Busch could also retire at the end of the year, and I certainly think that is a possibility too that could come down the road. But I also think there's a chance that maybe he doesn't retire and sticks around for a few more years. He wants to race against his son Brexton, who will of course be 10 years old this upcoming year. We'll see what happens there. But I think for Kyle Busch's sake, it's going to be very interesting to see what he does for the upcoming year. We'll see if he can truly perform in 2025. Otherwise, I think there's a good chance he may not stick around with this team past 2025. So, that is going to today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment below your thoughts below on today's episode. You think that Kyle Busch stays with RCR in 2025? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about the championship talk and what track you think should host the championship? Let me know in the comments below. I don't think there's going to be more content dropping today unless some major news does break. Tomorrow, I may be taking an early look at the Cup lineup. I'm not quite sure at this point. There's some other content dropping. We've got some team previews dropping really, really soon. I think we're going to do an early look at the Spire Motorsports lineup for next year potentially. Tomorrow, and we'll see other content dropping really soon as well. As we close out the rest, I may be doing a Q&A for Christmas as well. We'll have content, of course, be like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Eric Almirola, Connor Zilisch, Carson Quaffle, all that kind of stuff coming up really soon on the channel. Truck Predictions is dropping Sunday, so expect to see that as well. I've got some other content dropping throughout the remainder of the week. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.